Hi, thank you for watching. My name is Roskam and I'm an end-user computing consultant at ITQ. Today with me is
Sander Noordijk, Solution Engineer, Digital Workspace at VMware.
Sander, welcome.
Thanks.
Today we are going to create a couple of sessions about Horizon, and we want the user to be able to join us and set up a whole basic Horizon environment.
Yeah.
Tell me something about what is VDI?
Well, VDI has basically been the same thing that we've been doing for the past 10 years, you know, to get a virtual desktop up and running, get published applications out to the end user. And I think the last year has proven that the VDI is still very relevant, as most of the people had to start working from home or started working remotely, and they needed to offer up a way to get the most secure internally into the company, into the own company's data center. And that perfect solution is VDI, it's still there. So whether I still feel that we're moving towards a more modern workplace where everything comes from different locations, from different SaaS services, for example, I still think Windows applications, they're not going away. So we're still always going to have a need for VDI. So I think this is a perfect topic to tackle.
Yeah, right. So we're using Horizon to use VDI. Do you want to explain something more about Horizon?
I think it'd be a good way to do that with a bit more visuals. Alright, so as mentioned, Horizon is going to be the way to offer desktops and applications to our end users. So when we're going to draw out how this works, the end user is going to be a great place to start. So we have our end user right here, and he'll be working on a device. In this case, it'll be a laptop, but obviously it can be any sort of client, whether it's a full desktop, a laptop, a mobile device, or a tablet. As long as he can run the Horizon agent, he can get access to his resources. So first off, when we come in, the first thing you'll hit is going to be the connection server. And the connection server is going to be our one-stop shop. So it's at the same time the connection broker, it's the management point, it is the way to offer up our licenses, and obviously one is none, so you always want to have multiple ones of these. But we're also going to need some internal resources, because we need to identify whether or not our user is who he says he is. So I'll draw these over here. So first off, we'll need the Active Directory, because we need to find out whether or not our user is who he says he is. We're going to need, obviously, DNS, because we need to know where it all is. We're going to need a SQL database. And we're going to need a certificate authority to make sure that everything is as secure as possible. So once the user is identified, the connection server offers up resources. These resources we'll draw over here. And they come in three forms. So the first is VDI. So that's basically a standard desktop, a one-on-one relationship, probably Windows or Linux, one-on-one. The second one is RDS. And RDS is your typical remote desktop server or terminal server from the past, where we have a Windows server operating system pretending to be a desktop operating system, where multiple people can work together on the same server. And lastly, we've got apps. So these are published applications where you'll start up an entire server on the backside, but the user only sees the application. So this is perfect for users like me who run a Mac but want to access the occasional Windows application like, for example, Visio, which doesn't exist on Mac. These run on, obviously, the backbone, which is ESX. That's our hypervisor. And we're going to need some place to put it all, so that's going to be the data store. But all of this resembles just a Windows desktop. That's not going to be more enough. So we're going to be adding user settings and profile settings, and we'll be doing this with Dynamic Environment Manager. So not only does this fix our problem with user profiles, it also takes care of user settings, application settings, and most importantly, computer settings. But on top of that, we'll be adding applications. And for that, we'll be using app volumes. And these servers are called App Volumes Managers. Physical servers, which we'll be adding in order to add applications. These are VMDKs or VHD, complete hard disks, which are attached to our operating system in order for the user to get a seamless experience. Now, if we look at this configuration, this part right here is what we refer to as a pod. And we can have multiple pods in our organization. So these can be seen as tiny data centers. They can be multiple pods in your same office, but it can also be used as a remote location, for example. So let's say, for example, this pod 1 is in Amsterdam, and alongside that I have another pod which is in Palo Alto. Now what we can do is connect these two, and we'll do that through cloud pod architecture. It's really a simple way to get these two to communicate and leverage the entitlements I have over my personal home pod and use these same ones on the pod where I am. And I will always be redirected to the pod that is nearest to me. So when I'm visiting the VMware's office in Palo Alto, I'll be getting a desktop pool from the Californian server. But when I'm in the Netherlands, I'll get it from the Netherlands. It is, however, possible to make sure that I always get redirected to a certain pod, and that's what's called a home site. So while we're on the topic of getting things to the outside, or making it available on the outside, we're going to need a couple of other things. So the first thing, and I'll draw these over here, the first thing is going to be the Unified Access Gateway, or UAG. So the UAG makes sure that we get secure access to all of our internal resources, and it also helps with a bunch of other stuff. The second one is an optional pod, which is Workspace ONE Access. Workspace ONE Access offers up an app catalog across all of devices with a single sign-on into your applications, including the VMware Horizon environment. And what's cool is that we can utilize true SSO in order to allow access through certificates without having the need for the Active Directory, which is a very cool and very safe way to do this. And lastly, the last component is going to be Cloud Connector. So the Cloud Connector connects to our Horizon Cloud infrastructure, which I'll draw over here. And Horizon Cloud is our way to combine all of our cloud resources into one management plane. So we can manage the same Horizon environments for on-premises, for Microsoft's Azure, for VMware on AWS, and we can manage these all through one cloud control plane. Also, licensing can be done through that, image management can be done through that, and we can still use all of the on-premises parts like app volumes and dynamic environment manager settings. We can pull all of these into the Horizon Cloud Control plane, and all that with a single unified license. So that is a great way in order to start making your cloud transition. But for today's exercise, we are going to be focusing on a single pod. We'll be taking a look at all of the on-premises components, and we'll be taking care of app volumes and dynamic environment manager. So let's go back to Age.
Thank you, Sander, for explaining the big picture about Horizon. Today we're going to install the basic, which starts with installing the Horizon connection server. If you want to click along, make sure you have a basic setup ready. We have a lab environment. Make sure you have at least one ESX host, one vCenter server appliance, a domain controller, and an SQL server for the database. If everything is ready, let's dive into the technique. So first of all, we need to have a admin account, a service account for Horizon, and at least one security group for the Horizon admins. I've already created them in the Active Directory. As you can see here, the Horizon admin account group is created. I've also created a Horizon Help Desk user group and a Horizon user group for the users who are going to log on to the environment. I've also created 2 admin accounts for me and for Sander, and a service account for Horizon, in which we are going to use later during the configuration. For the SQL server, I've gone ahead and created a local service account in the SQL Management Studio. The only thing we need to enter here is a login name, which we're going to use during the configuration. We entered the password, and we deselected the enforce password policy. Click OK, and your login is ready. So all we need to now have to do is to create a database. Now let's call this HowTo Horizon events.
I think ideally in a real-life scenario, you would probably have a DBA doing this for you, right?
Yeah, right. But to make it more clear to the user, to the viewer, that's who it is. So we're going to add an owner of the database, in which we're going to select the service account we've created within SQL. We click OK, and we're going to the options. The recovery model can be set to simple, and basically that's all we need to do for the database. So we now have a database ready for the Horizon events with an SQL account to manage it. Let's go over to the connection server. Mm-hmm. I've gone ahead and logged on to myvmware.com and downloaded the connection server setup. So let's install it.
It was really simple, so straightforward installer, right?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So let's start. We start by clicking next. We accept the license terms. We accept the default location where the connection server is being installed. Mm-hmm. This is probably the only part where you have to think what you're going to do. In our case, we're going to install the default standard Horizon server. We're going to install one Horizon server in this environment. Mm-hmm. If I would have already installed a Horizon server and I want to put another server next to it within the pod, I can select a replica server. And if I want to do true SSO, I would install the enrollment server. But in this case, we'll leave it standard. We use IP version 4, so we just click next.
Yeah, and so adding extra connection servers to your environment is also going to be very simple because it's just selecting that option and then entering the credentials or the details for your environment. It just adds everything automatically.
Yeah. You just have to first set up it correctly, and then you can install a replica server that will automatically get the whole configuration from the database. Yep. So we enter a recovery password. We click next. We automatically configure the firewall. Mm-hmm. And this is another part where we have to use. We have to put in the group for the Horizon admin. So let me quickly check the group name. We created a group called Horizon-admins. So we entered the name here. And we click next. Now we deselect the join the improvement program. We click next, next. And we leave this at general because we're not going to install this in the cloud. We use a local on-premises lab environment, so we just select general.
It's a cool feature though when you're deploying in a certain cloud because it reaps the benefits of being specialized for that instance. Yeah.
Well, this will take a while, so we'll be back shortly. So the Horizon setup is finished.
Yeah.
I need to find my mouse. So we deselect the show documentation.
Which you at home might obviously want to do.
True.
You don't need it, you've got us.
We are experienced people. So we are now ready to enter the admin console. As you can see here, our connection isn't private yet. We're going to install a certificate soon, so we have a secure connection. But first we want to do some other configurations in the admin console. The admin account of Sander and I are member of the Horizon admin groups, so we should be able to log on.
So we're not special domain admins or any elevated privileges anywhere, it's just for the Horizon configuration.
And here we are. So the first thing Horizon asks is for us to enter a license. Of course, we have a license, which we will enter and click OK. As you can see, the license is accepted.
Fun fact, you're using a perpetual license, so that's basically a key. When you're using a subscription license, you will need to connect to the Horizon Cloud Connector, which I mentioned before, and then you'll get a license pushed down automatically.
Yeah, true. So next up, we are going to add our vCenter server. We select Service and we click Add. Yeah. We enter the name of our vCenter server appliance.
And the vCenter server obviously will orchestrate all of the automated tasks for creating pools, creating the VDI.
Yep.
Yep.
I have to enter the name correctly. We enter the username, which we will specify our service account.
Yep.
And we enter the password. We leave all settings here default and select Next. You will get a certificate error, which you have to accept.
What might be useful to mention is that your service account needs certain privileges within vCenter.
Yep.
And there are a couple, so you're best off just go to the to the VMware documentation for that.
Yeah, true. Regarding storage settings, everything we do here we leave default, and we are ready to add the vCenter server. So as you can see, the server has been successfully added. So the next thing we do is we need to enter a domain account for the instant clones to be created and be placed in the right OU. The default domain is already selected, so we enter the credentials of our service account. And press OK.
Yeah, and if you might forget this step, you'll definitely run into problems creating the tools.
Oh yeah, you will. So we've now added the license, vCenter, the domain. Let's go ahead and use the configure the database we created earlier for the events. So down here on the tab Event Configuration, we have the Edit button, and we can add here our the credentials for the database service. So which is the SQL 01. c.itq.lab. It's a Microsoft SQL server. We use the default port. The database name was HowTo Horizon Events. The username was sh Horizon 8 Events. And the password we've created.
And this was the local password within the SQL database, right?
Yes. The table prefix we're not going to, we leave default and we select OK. So we now have a database for our events. If something happens within Horizon, it will get registered in the database. You also wanted to configure some other settings, which were
not so much maybe configure, but what we can do is quickly take a look at the cloud pod architecture, because that's a really simple thing to do as well. So just imagine if you have multiple pods. We just explained what those are. In this screen here, you'll be able to connect these two together, and you'll get your global entitlements over both of these locations. Yep. And it might be fun to spout a few numbers for that, because there are certain limitations for that. So basically, the cloud pod architecture limits at 12,000 VDI sessions per pod, although that is a maximum amount. So you probably don't want to push towards that. and you can add up to 7 connection servers, for example. But whether you should you run into the limits of these cloud pod architecture sessions, so for example 250,000 sessions for your entire architecture, you can just add a separate CPA and have them connect together. So it's very flexible, and it really shows the scale of what we can achieve with Horizon.
Yeah, true. I remember the last thing you would like to configure, which were the role-based access control.
Yep,
for the user group we created for the help desk.
Yeah, because we're not going to do it.
No, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about this this role-based access control?
Sure thing. So what Aag is doing, he's selecting a group which we created in the AD, and with role-based access control we can really granularly specify what we want to allow or disallow the users to do. So should the help desk administrator be able to cover sessions, for example, or disconnect users and maybe reset some things, but we don't want them to change pools, or we don't want them to change the cloud pod architecture, for example. So the way role-based access control works is really extensive list with pre-made profiles, but you can also edit these profiles to make them your own.
Yeah, you could create your own roles within the Horizon environment.
Exactly.
So what I've done here is select the Horizon Help Desk user group, which we created in Active Directory. I press OK, and I click Next to select a role. Now, as you can see here, the list of roles are already created by VMware, but you have the possibility to create your own role. In this case, we're going to select the Help Desk Administrator role. We click Next, and we click Finish. So, easy peasy, right?
Easy peasy, yeah.
The last part I want to cover is the certificate.
Yeah.
We created we are using a certificate authority to publish certificates to our machines for a secure connection. What we have to do to configure this, and I'm going to close the Horizon admin console and open up the certificate manager.
Yeah, so the certificate authority should already be in place.
Yeah, we have it already set up. There are multiple blogs on the internet on how to do this. I will open up the certificate policy. And what I've also have done is created a certificate policy within Active Directory. So the domain controller will automatically publish a certificate to all servers within the OU. In which case is, as you can see here, the second one. The first one we have to edit because it's not a trusted certificate.
It's self-signed, right?
It's self-signed.
From the Horizon install itself.
True, and it has a friendly name. And this friendly name we are going to use with the certificate which has been given out by our certificate authority. So we delete the name VDM right here.
Stands for Virtual Desktop Manager.
Yes. And we edit it on the certificate published by our certificate authority. And press OK. The next thing we need to do now is to reboot the machine or restart the services for Horizon, in which case we are going to do.
It's always nice when we can just restart the service and don't have to go through the whole painful rebooting process.
So this is the Horizon View Connection server service. We're just going to restart it and see where it goes.
Yeah. And also a fun fact, which you might have already noticed, is that the console is completely HTML5. So we've done away with the old Java and Flash installers. So you can basically approach it from every browser you want. And Aag's browser of choice is, strangely, Edge.
I like Edge Chromium, sorry. So the Horizon Connection server service has been restarted. This takes a couple of minutes. Let's check if we have a secure connection now.
Yeah. And it can even take a couple of minutes after the service has already been restarted, right?
Yeah, true. So as you can see, we immediately get the login screen. We do not get a certificate error. So this rounds up this episode about installing and configuring the Horizon Connection server. The next episode, we're going to create instant clones. We're going to create an image and desktop pools and published apps. If you want to click along, make sure you have a virtual machine ready with Windows 10 installed and you have downloaded the VMware OS optimization tool from the VMware Fling website. Sander, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, it was fun.
And see you on the next episode.